Do you have big dreams but struggle to take action? Do you know exactly what you need to do, but somehow you just don't do it? Are you ambitious in your mind but lazy in your actions? There was a taxi driver named David who had the biggest dreams but the smallest discipline, until one passenger showed him the painful truth about ambition without action. This is his story. David had been driving a taxi for 4 years in the city. Every morning, he'd wake up at 7 a.m., later than he planned, always hitting snooze 3 or 4 times. He'd rush through his routine and head out to his taxi, a beaten-up sedan that he kept promising himself he'd clean tomorrow. But David wasn't lazy because he lacked dreams. In fact, David had massive ambitions. He wanted to start his own ride-share company, bigger and better than the others. He had notebooks full of ideas, business plans half-written, websites he'd started but never finished. He spent hours watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship, reading success stories, imagining his future empire. He had the vision, he had the intelligence, and most importantly, he thought he had time. But there was one problem that kept him stuck in the same place year after year. David was ambitious, but he was lazy, and that combination was slowly killing his dreams. David's days followed the same exhausting pattern. He'd wake up with grand plans. Today would be the day he'd finally take action, finally start building something real. He'd tell himself, "Today, I'm going to work on the business plan for 3 hours after my shift." But when his shift ended, he was tired, and that voice in his head would whisper, "You deserve rest. You can start tomorrow." So he'd go home, collapse on the couch, scroll through social media for hours, and promise himself that tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow never was. His brother would say, "David, you've been talking about this business for 3 years. When are you actually going to do something?" David would get defensive, explaining how tired he was, how he needed to wait for the right moment. But deep down, he knew the truth. His friends had stopped taking him seriously. David the dreamer, David the talker, David who never actually does anything. And it hurt because David could feel his potential dying inside him, day by day, excuse by excuse. He was 28 years old, and he felt like life was passing him by while he sat on the sidelines, watching, dreaming, but never playing. One humid afternoon in July, David picked up a passenger from a corporate office downtown. The man was in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He had the air of someone who had achieved something significant. As they drove through traffic, the man made a phone call. David couldn't help but overhear. The man was calm but firm. "I don't want to hear about your plans. Show me what you've done. Results. Not intentions. Results." He hung up and caught David's eyes in the rearview mirror, dealing with someone who's all talk, no action. David felt uncomfortable, like the man was somehow talking about him. The man smiled. "You're a taxi driver. But you don't want to be a taxi driver forever, do you?" David's heart skipped. "No. I want to start my own business. Ride-share company. I've got it all planned out." The man nodded. "How long have you had this plan?" David hesitated. "About 3 years." "And what have you done in those 3 years?" David opened his mouth to list his research, his ideas. But the words died, because the honest answer was, almost nothing. The silence hung heavy. Then the man said something that pierced David's soul. "You know what's more dangerous than having no ambition? Having ambition but no discipline. Because at least the person with no ambition isn't torturing themselves with false hope." The man settled back in his seat. "I'm going to tell you something that took me 20 years to learn. I used to be just like you. Ambitious, full of ideas, always planning, always waiting for the perfect moment. I had this grand vision of starting my own consulting firm. I spent 5 years getting ready, reading books, taking courses, planning. Know what happened? Nothing. While I was getting ready, other people less qualified than me, they just started. They fumbled, they failed, they learned, and they grew. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. Here's what nobody tells you about ambition. Ambition without action is just a sophisticated form of self-torture. It's daydreaming with anxiety attached. You get to feel the pressure of wanting more without ever experiencing the satisfaction of achieving it. You're stuck in this awful middle ground, too aware to be content with where you are, but too lazy to do what it takes to get where you want to be. The man pointed out the window. See those buildings? Every single one was built by someone who stopped planning and started laying bricks. Not when conditions were perfect. They just started. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. You want to know the secret? Stop thinking and start doing. 5 minutes of real work is worth more than 5 hours of planning. Action is the only thing that separates dreamers from doers. And right now, you're a dreamer pretending to be a doer. Those words hit David like a freight train made of truth. He had been living in a fantasy world, a comfortable prison where he got to feel ambitious without ever risking failure. He thought about the notebooks full of ideas that had never left the pages. The business plans never executed. The website domains purchased but never developed. 3 years of his life spent in the space between wanting and doing. And what did he have to show for it? Nothing. He was still driving the same taxi, still living in the same apartment, still dreaming the same dreams. David realized his laziness wasn't about being tired from work. It was about fear. Fear of failure. Fear of discovering that maybe he wasn't as capable as he imagined. So he'd hidden behind preparation, behind not being ready yet. But he was ready. He'd been ready for 2 years. He just didn't want to face the discomfort of actual work, the vulnerability of putting his ideas into the real world where they could be criticized or rejected. His ambition had been a shield protecting him from action. From that moment on, David made a decision that would change his entire life. Not tomorrow. That very day, when he dropped off the businessman, David didn't go home and relax. He went straight to a coffee shop, opened his laptop, and worked for 3 hours on his business plan, actually executing. He made a list of 10 potential investors and sent emails to all of them before he could talk himself out of it. They weren't perfect emails, but they were real. The next morning, David woke up at 5 a.m. and worked on his business for 2 hours before his taxi shift. 2 real, focused hours of actual work. He did this every single day. Some days he wanted to quit. But David had learned something crucial. Discipline doesn't require motivation. Discipline is doing it especially when you don't feel like it. Within 2 weeks, 1 investor responded. Within a month, David had his first meeting. Within 3 months, he had a prototype of his app. It was rough and imperfect, but it existed. It was real. His family's skepticism turned to support. His friends stopped making jokes and started asking how they could help. Because David had become a different person. Choosing action over comfort, progress over perfection. Something incredible happened over the next 18 months. The energy David used to waste on endless preparation, he poured it into execution, into building, failing, learning, and trying again. Within the first year, David launched a beta version of his rideshare app with 20 drivers. It wasn't perfect, but he was learning in real time. Within 18 months, he had 200 drivers and had expanded to 3 cities. By the end of the second year, David had 500 drivers, a small team of 5 employees, and had caught the attention of a venture capital firm. He still drove occasionally, not because he had to, but because he never wanted to forget where he started. His brother now worked for him as operations manager. His friends now asked for business advice. But David never said, "I told you so." His results spoke louder than any words could. The businessman who had confronted him, David tracked him down and thanked him. "You saved me from wasting my entire life," David told him. The man smiled and said, "I didn't save you. I just showed you the mirror. You saved yourself by deciding to step through it." Here's what David discovered. Being ambitious but lazy is not a personality trait, it's a choice. And it's a choice that will rob you of everything you could become. You can have all the dreams, all the plans, all the potential, but none of it matters if you don't take action. The world doesn't reward ambition or potential. The world rewards execution. It rewards the person who shows up every day and does the work, even when they don't feel like it. Your unexecuted ideas have exactly the same value as ideas that were never thought of at all. 0. An idea in your head is worth nothing. An idea executed poorly is worth something. An idea executed consistently is worth everything. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. You will never feel completely ready. You will never have perfect conditions. That moment you're waiting for, it doesn't exist. The only moment is now. The lion doesn't spend years preparing to hunt. It hunts. It learns by doing. That's how everything great gets built. Not through perfect planning, but through imperfect action, repeated consistently over time. So ask yourself right now, what dream have you been putting off? What business have you been planning but not building? What first step have you been avoiding? And what excuse are you using to justify your inaction? Because let's be honest, they're just excuses. You're not too busy, you're scared. You're not too tired, you're comfortable. Here's what you're going to do today. You're going to take one concrete action toward your goal. Not a big one, just one real action. 5 minutes. Send that email. Make that phone call. Write that first page. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Not because you feel motivated, but because you've decided. Because ambition without discipline is torture, but ambition with discipline is transformation. Stop torturing yourself with dreams you never chase. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't knowledge or resources. It's action. Consistent, imperfect, uncomfortable action. Your life, your dreams, your future, they're all waiting on the other side of that first step. So stop planning and start doing. The wheel is in your hands. Now stop thinking about driving and actually drive.